Snow is supposed to bring magic to a child's birthday, but in Mapleford that night, it hides a nightmare. Behind the barn door, two 7-year-old girls in tattered pink dresses kneel barefoot in the freezing mud, feeding pigs, their voices echoing through the storm with only one word: Daddy. When Silas Carter, a soldier who has been away from home for years, walks into the blizzard with his loyal German shepherd by his side, what he witnesses breaks his heart and starts a battle no father should have to face. Is he strong enough to bring his daughters home? Or will fear and lies bury the truth beneath the snow? Snow blanketed the roofs of Mapleford, weighing the town under silence. The only sound was the wind dragging across frozen branches. Silas Carter, 38, a man hardened by war, yet softened by years of longing, stepped off the bus into that quiet. His breath curled white in the air, his military coat drawn close, the scar over his brow a silent badge of endurance. Beside him walked Valor, his German shepherd, alert and steady. They had shared foxholes and firefights. Once, the dog had dragged Silas from the rubble of a collapsing wall. Now Valor's paws sank into snow, his eyes sweeping every shadow as though the small town could still hide enemies. This day was meant to be different. It was Ellie and Emma's 7th birthday, his twin daughters, whom he had not held for 7 long years. He had sent packages each year: a doll missing an arm but patched with love, a book filled with his scribbled notes, postcards bent by distance. Tonight he wanted to give them more than gifts. He wanted to give them himself. The road wound toward the wooden house where his ex-wife, Marjorie, now lived with her new husband, Dale. Silas pictured lights glowing, laughter spilling into the snow, 2 little girls rushing to the door. But when he arrived, the porch was dark. Snow piled thick on the steps. No candles, no sound. Only a jar of dead flowers sat frozen on the rail. Valor let out a low growl, the sound of unease. Silas knocked. After a pause, the door creaked open. Marjorie's face appeared, thinner now, her hair dull, her eyes unsettled. "Why are you here?" she whispered. "It's our daughter's birthday," Silas said, voice steady in the frost. "Where are Ellie and Emma?" Marjorie's grip tightened on the doorframe. "They're busy. Come another day." "Busy?" His tone sharpened. "On their birthday?" Before she could reply, a harsh male voice cut through the cold. "Hurry up! Do you want the pigs to starve, you useless brats?" The words pierced him. Silas pushed past her, Valor leaping ahead, paws throwing up snow. Around the side of the house, footprints trailed toward a low pigsty, its door leaking yellow lantern light. The stench hit him as he stepped inside. 2 small figures stood barefoot in the muck. Ellie and Emma, in dresses that had once been pink, now little more than rags, held buckets nearly their size. Their hair was tangled, their skin pale, their thin shoulders quivering under the cold. The light cast their shadows frail against the wall, as though a breath might erase them. Silas's throat tightened. This was not the reunion he had dreamed. "Ellie! Emma!" His voice broke. The girls startled. One bucket tipped, grain scattering across the floor. For a heartbeat they stared wide-eyed, and then together whispered the word that cut through the years. "Dad." Silas dropped to his knees, tears stinging. He reached out, but stopped short, afraid his touch might break them. Why here on your birthday? On your—" Emma clutched her sister's hand. Ellie's lips trembled. Her whisper barely reached him. "If we don't, he will." The door creaked behind them. Valor bristled, a growl rolling from deep in his chest. Dal stood in the doorway, cigarette glowing between his fingers, his bulk framed by smoke. His smirk was cold. "Well, the soldier shows up, finds his girls in my pigsty. You've got nerve." Silas's body burned with rage, but reason anchored him. One wrong move, one call, and the law would brand him the kidnapper. He would lose them forever. He steadied his breath, placed a hand on Ellie's trembling shoulder. "Come with me." Right now, for a moment, hope lit their eyes. Emma lifted one bare foot, edging toward him. Silas's heart blazed. Just one step more, and he could carry them out. But their eyes flicked past him. At the house door stood Marjorie, frozen in confusion, and Dale's glare hardened into silent threat. Fear chained them. The lifted foot sank back into the straw. "No," Ellie whispered, voice like wind through snow. "We can't." Silas froze, the sight carving him hollow. He bent, lifted the fallen bucket, set it aside neatly, then pressed their small hands in his. "Listen to me. I will come back. Next time, nothing will keep you here." "I swear it." Tears rimmed their eyes, but both nodded, clutching his promise like a flame against the cold. Silas rose, Valor at his heel, and walked past Dale without another word. Outside, the wind lashed his face. Snow swirled around him, biting and sharp. But in his chest burned fire. The sight of his daughter's broken childhood would not fade, and his vow to them had already set his path. The wind howled harder as Silas left the pigsty. Valor pressed close to his side. Behind him, Dale leaned against the doorframe with that mocking smirk, smoke curling into the night air. Every step Silas took crunched against the frozen earth, but his heart was heavier than the snow. He had come to give his daughters the embrace of a father. Instead, he was forced to walk away, with nothing but their whispered plea etched into his chest. Valor's amber eyes flicked up at him, the dog sensing his master's torment, a faint whine escaping his throat, as if to remind Silas that the fight was far from over. Dale's voice followed, laced with cruelty. "Try it, soldier. Take one more step with them, and I'll have the sheriff here before you can blink. They'll call it kidnapping, and you'll never see those girls again." The words were meant as a leash, and for now Silas had no choice but to yield. He clenched his fists inside his pockets, forced himself forward into the storm, his vow echoing louder than Dale's threats. "Next time, nothing will keep me from them." Across the fence that divided the Carter property from the neighboring yard, a pair of weary eyes had been watching. Mrs. Nora Whitfield, wrapped in a wool cardigan pulled tight against the cold, stood with a small lantern in hand. She was in her mid-50s, with silver streaks running through her chestnut hair, a face etched by years of both kindness and regret. Once, she had been a nurse at the town's clinic, known for her steady hands and gentle words, but tragedy had silenced much of her warmth. Years ago, her only son had fallen into bad company, and she had turned away too late. His life had unraveled, and the guilt of her inaction had followed her ever since, turning her cautious, hesitant to intervene in others' affairs. Tonight, however, as she peered over the frost-stiffened fence, she saw Silas walking into the storm with his loyal dog, and behind him, two children still trapped in the shadows of a man's cruelty. Her heart tightened. She had often glimpsed the twins outside, thin arms carrying water buckets, bare feet sinking in snow, their laughter muffled into silence. But she had always told herself it wasn't her business. Now those excuses wavered, fragile as ice. Valor stopped suddenly, his ears perking, his nose twitching toward Nora's yard. With a quick bound, he left Silas's side and crossed the fence line, leaving crisp paw prints stamped deep into the snow. Nora startled, gripping the leash of her terrier, a timid brown dog that barked sharply at the German shepherd's sudden arrival. But Valor only stood tall, silent, his gaze fixed on Nora with unnerving intent, as if urging her to follow his path, to see what he had seen. The terrier quieted under Valor's calm stance, lowering its head in reluctant submission. Silas turned at the sound of the bark. His eyes met Nora's across the fence, hers full of hesitation, his blazing with unspoken fury and determination. For a long moment, no words passed, only the storm filling the silence. Silas finally gave a small nod, a soldier's gesture of acknowledgement before whistling softly. Valor obeyed, padding back to his master, but the footprints remained carved into the snow, stark and undeniable. Inside her house, Nora paced by the window long after Silas disappeared into the storm. The image of those little girls would not leave her, their small hands clutching heavy buckets, their shoulders hunched against the cold. She remembered once treating a child for frostbite at the clinic, the scars that never fully healed. Would Ellie and Emma's childhood become nothing but scars? She set down her lantern, her hand trembling slightly. Fear told her to stay silent. Victor Dale was a man known for his temper, and the neighborhood had learned to keep out of his way. but conscience gnawed at her, louder now than ever. Meanwhile, Silas reached the small motel where he had taken a room. The neon sign flickered, casting red light against the white drifts. Inside, the heater hummed weakly, but the room still smelled of damp plaster. Silas lowered himself onto the chair, Valor sitting at his feet, eyes watchful. Silas pulled off his gloves, his hands raw from the cold, and took out the small notebook he carried everywhere. He wrote in clipped sentences, soldiers' notes, Ellie and Emma, Pigsty, barefoot, threat from Dale, birthday night. Each word carved deeper into his determination. Valor rested his head against Silas's knee, warm and steady. Silas placed a hand on the dog's thick fur, drawing strength. "We'll get them back," he murmured. "Next time, we won't leave them there." Valor thumped his tail once, as if sealing the vow. Back at the house across the fence, Nora sat at her desk, staring at the snow outside. Her terrier lay curled in a blanket, already asleep, but she remained restless. Her conscience wrestled with fear. She thought of her son, of how silence and delay had cost him everything. She thought of the German shepherd's eyes, unwavering, demanding action. Finally, she drew a deep breath. She would not repeat her mistake. Not again. The snow continued to fall, covering the yard, but the footprints Valor had left did not fade. They lay etched like a quiet message in the storm proof that someone had already chosen to act. The storm had eased by morning, though the streets of Mapleford still lay buried under white silence. From the window of his small motel room, Silas Carter stared out at the world muffled in snow. Valor sat by the window, his body a silhouette against the gray dawn, ears pricked to every groan of wind, every passing truck's rumble. The dog's watchfulness was constant, as though guarding against an enemy that lingered unseen. Silas, hunched over the small desk, wrote in a battered leather notebook. Across the cover he had scrawled in capital letters, "Ellie and Emma Case." Page after page he filled with brief, soldier's notes, dates, times, details of what he had seen, the smell of the pigsty, the weight of the buckets, Dale's threats, and most importantly, his daughter's whispered word, "Dad." He paused, rubbing his scarred brow. His hand trembled, but he forced it steady. Every entry was both a record and a vow. He pulled out his phone, scrolling to the number of an old ally, Samantha Rhodes. Samantha was not just any attorney. She had once defended veterans in complex custody disputes. In her late 30s, sharp-featured with auburn hair often tied back in a tight knot, Samantha carried the no-nonsense air of a woman who had seen injustice and refused to be cowed by it. Years earlier, she had helped Silas with a property claim when his deployment had left him unable to fight red tape. She had impressed him with her precision, her ability to turn emotion into strategy. Now he needed her more than ever. When she answered, her voice was crisp, professional. "Samantha Rhodes." "It's Silas," he said quietly. "I need your help. It's about Ellie and Emma." There was a pause, the weight of recognition sinking in. "I'll clear my schedule. Send me everything you've written. We'll build the file step by step. CPS won't move without solid evidence. Don't confront Dale directly, you'll only play into his hands." Silas exhaled, some of the storm inside him easing. "I'll send it tonight." "Thank you," Valor nudged his leg as if to say the first step had been taken. Silas scratched behind the dog's ears, drawing strength from the familiar comfort. "We're not alone anymore, boy." While Silas compiled his case, across town the school bell rang shrilly over children bundled in coats. Ellie and Emma trudged into the classroom, their small frames swallowed by threadbare sweaters. Their shoes were worn thin, wet from slush, their hair tangled and clinging to damp faces. They carried no lunch boxes, only a folded scrap of bread tucked into Emma's pocket. At the blackboard, Grace Miller turned, chalk in hand, her gaze sweeping the room. Grace was in her early 30s, with dark blonde hair pulled back in a bun and steady gray eyes that could soften with kindness or sharpen with resolve. She had grown up in Mapleford, the daughter of a single mother who had worked double shifts to keep food on the table. That memory of hunger had never left her. It was what drove her to notice the quiet children, the ones who slipped into corners and tried to vanish. Today her eyes fell on Ellie and Emma. She saw the way Emma shivered, hands red from the cold. She noticed Ellie nibbling a crumb of hardened bread, her lips pale. Grace's chest tightened. At lunch break, while the cafeteria buzzed with chatter and trays clattered, the twins sat alone near the back wall. They did not speak, only shared the stale bread between them. Grace lingered nearby, heart heavy with a truth she could not yet prove. Later, as she gathered notebooks left behind, her hand brushed against a small, water-stained journal. Its cover was torn, pages crinkled from melted snow. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside, the handwriting was shaky, childlike. Shovel snow. Hands hurt. Too cold. Hungry. Mom crying, "Miss Dad!" The words blurred with smudges, as though tears or snow had smeared them. Grace's throat closed. This was not imagination. This was testimony written by a child's hand. She pulled out her phone, snapping quiet photographs of the pages. Each click of the camera was a vow in her own way. These children would not be forgotten. She slipped the journal back exactly where she had found it, unwilling to let the twins know she had seen their private cries. That evening, in the soft glow of a cafe lamp on Mapleford's snowy main street, Grace typed a message. "Mr. Carter, I am Grace Miller, Ellie and Emma's teacher. I need to meet with you immediately. This cannot be solved through words alone. Tomorrow, 6 p.m., Riverbend Cafe. Please keep this between us. Their safety depends on it." She attached the photographs and pressed send. Her hand shook afterward, but resolve steadied her. She would not be complicit in silence. Back at the motel, Silas's phone buzzed. He opened the message, reading slowly, his breath catching at the sight of the photographed words. Valor lifted his head, ears flicking as if he too sensed the shift in the air. Silas leaned back, hand covering his mouth, eyes burning. For the first time since stepping into Mapleford, he felt hope move like a flame in the snowbound night. The storm struck Mapleford like a beast unchained. Snow slashed sideways across the night, bearing fences and silencing roads. The wind wailed through the trees, tearing shutters from their hinges. It was a night when no child should have been outside, yet Dale's drunken shouting carried through the gale, demanding obedience. His figure swayed in the yellow glow of the porch light. Bottle in hand, his voice slurred with fury. "Get out there! The pigs won't feed themselves." Ellie and Emma stumbled into the yard, each clutching a dented tin pail. At 7 years old, their limbs were too thin for the weight they bore, their dresses no defense against the storm. Snow clung to their lashes, their lips quivered blue, their bare feet sank into the ice-crusted ground. They tried to move quickly, but the pails were heavy, the snow relentless, and their small bodies trembled with exhaustion. Dale barked curses from the doorway, uncaring of the blizzard that swallowed their cries. Inside the house, Marjorie stood at the frosted window. Her hands gripped the sill, her knuckles white. Tears blurred her vision as she watched her daughter stumble. She had been a woman once proud of her charm, her auburn hair and quick wit, but years with Dale had eroded her. Fear had chained her tongue. Every protest met with threats and blows. Now she pressed her forehead against the cold glass, whispering words no one heard. "Forgive me, my babies." Yet she did not move. The fear was stronger than her courage. Out on the road, Silas had been restless in his motel room, pacing with Valor shadowing every step. The storm rattled the thin windows, but another sound pierced through the faint, mournful howl of a German shepherd. Valor's ears twitched, his body stiffened. He let out a sharp bark, then a long, urgent howl that cut into Silas's chest. It was the call of recognition, of family in danger. Silas didn't hesitate. He grabbed his coat, his boots crunching through snow as Valor bounded ahead, the dog's body slicing through the blizzard with purpose. They reached the Carter house just as Ellie's legs buckled. The pail slipped from her hands, scattering grain across the ice. Emma tried to steady her, but both collapsed into the drift, their cries lost in the storm. Dale cursed and stomped his foot on the porch, but he did not move to help. Silas's figure emerged from the white haze, broad shoulders bent against the storm, his breath steaming in ragged bursts. Valor raced to the girls first, his powerful frame shielding them from the wind. his tongue licking their frozen cheeks. Silas dropped to his knees beside them, scooping their frail bodies into his arms. "Ellie, Emma." His voice cracked, thick with both rage and sorrow. The girls' eyes fluttered open, tears mixing with snowflakes. In unison, their lips moved, trembling words spilling out. "Dad, we don't want to go back." That plea cut through Silas's soul like a blade. He pressed them tighter to his chest, his military coat wrapping around their shivering forms. Dale shouted something incoherent from the porch, his bottle swinging wildly. But Silas didn't even glance back. The decision had already been made. Snow blinded his path, but valor ran ahead, barking sharp and steady, guiding them toward the road. The dog's paw prints carved a trail of determination across the storm. Silas followed, his boots sinking deep into drifts, each step fueled by the fire of his daughter's words. Behind them, Marjorie's sobs fogged the glass, her hand against the pane as she watched them vanish into the white. After what felt like miles, a flickering neon sign appeared through the storm's veil. A roadside motel, its vacancy light glowing weak but hopeful. Silas staggered to the door, Valor pushing against his legs, Ellie and Emma clutching to him as though afraid he might vanish. The motel clerk, a stout man in his 60s with a balding crown and kindly eyes, looked up in shock at the sight of them. Two frozen girls, a soldier with wild eyes and a snow-caked dog. Without questions, he slid a key across the counter. "Room 7. Get them warm inside." The heater buzzed and warmth slowly filled the small room. Silas wrapped his daughters in blankets, his hands shaking as he lit the lamp. Their cheeks flushed pink again as the frost began to melt from their hair. Valor circled once at the door before settling down, his body pressed against the threshold, snow still clinging to his back, his eyes fixed outward. He was the sentinel, guarding the family he had always claimed as his own. Silas pulled a notebook from his pocket and began writing, capturing every detail: the blizzard, Dale's commands, the girls collapsing in the snow. He pulled out the USB drive Nora had given him, replaying the footage of his daughters in the pigsty. Grace's photographs of their notebook glowed on his phone screen. Now he added the girls' own words, their trembling confession, "We don't want to go back." Ellie and Emma huddled together on the bed, their breaths finally even, their tiny hands clasped tightly. Silas stroked their hair, whispering, "You're safe now. I won't let anyone hurt you again." For the first time in years, a fragile calm settled over him. The storm raged outside, snow piling high against the windows, but inside room 7 of that roadside motel, a father, his daughters, and a loyal German shepherd had carved out a fragile island of warmth. The Riverbend County Courthouse stood like a fortress of stone against the gray winter morning. Its tall windows were fogged with breath from within, condensation rolling down as if the building itself mourned the cases it held. Inside, the air carried the heavy stillness of anticipation. Wooden benches creaked beneath the weight of townsfolk, reporters, and curious neighbors who had come to witness the trial that had divided whispers across Mapleford. Snow still clung to coats and boots, melting into puddles on the courthouse floor. Silas Carter sat at the defense table, his posture erect, though the strain around his eyes betrayed nights without rest. His military bearing gave him dignity, his jaw set firm, but it was the presence of his daughters that anchored him. Ellie and Emma, both dressed in simple navy dresses chosen by Child Protective Services, sat with the CPS representative, their cheeks rosier than when he had first found them, though fear still lingered in their eyes. Valor, though not permitted inside, waited faithfully in the truck outside, his watch unwavering, as if even walls could not sever his duty. Across the aisle sat Dale, his thick-set body squeezed into an ill-fitted suit, his smirk forced into something resembling confidence. Beside him, his attorney, a polished man in his 40s with slicked hair and a sharp tongue, shuffled papers like weapons. And next to Dale sat Marjorie, her makeup carefully applied, her posture fragile. She looked every bit the grieving mother she tried to portray, but her eyes flickered nervously whenever they landed on her children. The gavel struck, echoing through the chamber, and Judge Collins, a stern man in his 60s with thinning gray hair and a reputation for fairness, called the trial to order. His voice carried the weight of years, his patience worn by countless lies heard within these walls. Dale's attorney opened with fire. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here because a man abandoned his children for years, then returned unannounced and tore them away from the stable home they knew. My client, Victor Dale, provided for them when their father did not. What Silas Carter calls a rescue, the law must recognize as abduction." His words rolled with practiced theatrics, and some in the audience shifted uneasily. Silas's attorney, Samantha Rhodes, rose calmly. Dressed in a charcoal suit, her auburn hair pulled back, she radiated measured authority. "We do not deny that Mr. Carter was absent. He served his country overseas. But what we will show you today is that absence was not abandonment. We will prove that these children were subjected to years of neglect and abuse under Dale's roof, and that Mr. Carter, upon witnessing their suffering, acted not as a kidnapper, but as a father reclaiming his duty." The evidence unfolded piece by piece. First came the video footage from Nora Whitfield's doorbell camera. Ellie and Emma in the pigsty, snow swirling around their bare legs, Dale's voice shouting cruel commands. Gasps rippled through the room. Nora, small and stooped with silver streaks in her hair, testified with trembling hands but steady voice. "I saw them many times. I told myself it wasn't my business. But the night I watched them collapse in the cold, I knew silence was a sin." Her words carried both guilt and courage, and the courtroom listened with rapt attention. Then Grace Miller took the stand. She carried herself with quiet dignity, her gray eyes softening as she spoke of the twins. "I noticed the bruises on their hands, the way they avoided attention. Their lunches were scraps. And this," she held up photocopied pages from the girls' journal, "these are their words, not accusations written by adults, but a child's testimony in pencil. Too cold. Hungry. Miss Dad." Her voice cracked, but she steadied it. "No child invents that kind of pain." Dr. Keller, a silver-haired pediatrician, presented medical reports confirming malnutrition and evidence of repeated exposure to extreme cold. His tone was clinical, but his words pierced. "These are not the conditions of children in a safe home." The weight of proof pressed heavy. Samantha's voice grew sharper as she turned to Marjorie. "Mrs. Carter, you lived in that house. Did you witness Dale's treatment of your daughters?" Silence stretched. Marjorie's painted face crumbled, tears smudging her mascara. "Yes," she whispered at first, then louder. "Yes, I saw. He made them work, made them sleep in the pigsty. I begged him to stop, but I was too afraid." Her sobs filled the chamber. Dale exploded, rising to shout, but the judge's gavel silenced him. The courtroom had seen enough. At last, Judge Collins leaned forward, his voice grave but resolute. "Based on the evidence provided, the testimony of witnesses, and the clear signs of abuse, this court grants temporary custody of Ellie and Emma Carter to their biological father, Mr. Silas Carter. Mr. Dale is prohibited from any contact. Mrs. Carter will be required to attend counseling and parenting classes before any future consideration of custody." The gavel struck. Relief and sobs mingled in the chamber. Silas gathered his daughters into his arms, tears streaming unchecked. "You're safe," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You're home." 1 year later, Mapleford bloomed with spring. The snow had melted into rolling green fields, and laughter returned to the air. Ellie and Emma, in bright sneakers, raced each other across the park. Their giggles carried on the breeze. Valor chased after them, his tongue lolling, his bark joyful. Silas sat on a bench beneath budding trees, watching them with a smile that reached deeper than words. The past still lingered in scars, but it no longer defined them. "I promised," he murmured, "and I kept my word." The girls waved at him, their faces radiant, and Silas rose to join them, his shadow now one among three, with Valor bounding ahead. Mapleford no longer seemed bleak, but alive. The air no longer sharp with winter, but softened with hope. And so, Silas, his daughters, and their faithful German shepherd found the home they had always longed for. Their story is not just about escaping cruelty, but about the power of love, courage, and the quiet voices who choose to stand against silence. It reminds us that even in the coldest winters, hope can still bloom like spring. What about you? Have you ever witnessed kindness that changed someone's life or found strength when you thought you had none? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We would love to hear your stories and reflections. If this journey touched your heart, please like this video and follow our channel for more stories of hope and healing. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful reminders that love, faith, and courage can overcome even the darkest nights.